What a freaking match. I mean, straight off the bat, all I can say is a big thank you to Carlos Alcaraz and Jannik Sinner for coming together and authoring one of the greatest matches of all time, period, point blank. Watching it, I think all of us were thinking this is up there as an instant contender for best non-Big Three match of this era, and as a standalone itself, it is just one of the greatest matches of all time. I mean, there's not really many other ways to say it. These two put together a show for the ages over the course of 5 hours and 15 minutes between an electric atmosphere in spite of the stadium not being at capacity just because the match ran so late into the night, but crowd intensity even at the tail end was not lacking at all, and with the record broken for latest US Open finish of all time, between all the drama with so many violent momentum shifts in this match, and then finally just 5 hours of sustained quality pretty much from start to finish, this one absolutely had all the ingredients to be a certified classic. These two, Carlos Alcaraz and Jannik Sinner, are without a doubt two of the greatest assets this game is going to have moving forward, and if you needed any further proof, that's 5 hours of 15 minutes of tape for why. This type of match and this type of rivalry really is what tennis has been yearning for, just for some promising signs post Big Three. And although prior to this one, Alcaraz Sinner didn't really have a classic in their head-to-head, even in their 3 prior meetings, I think that you could tell that Alcaraz Sinner already was producing more consistent quality tennis than any other all next-gen rivalry really had with the age group of the Zverev, Medvedev, and Tsitsipas's. And considering there has been, I would say, a little bit of a drought of matches that from start to finish were S-tier, apex level matches since, I would say, Wimbledon 2018. We've had some great ones since, obviously, but quality-wise, I don't think anything has approached that since. And while I would still place it quality-wise a tier below matches of that magnitude, this one was all the more important with who was playing this match. Two guys we all have such high hopes for in the future, and, they came together and delivered this absolute cracker of a match. I tried recording this right after the match at like 3 a.m. Unfortunately, my, voiceovers kind of glitched out on me, so I'm having to do it again, but I am still absolutely buzzing from that match last night still. I could still talk about it as if I just watched it. And that is such a welcome feeling because that really takes you back to stuff during the golden era where you can remember so vividly being so immersed in front of the TV into the wee hours of the morning watching a match like Djokovic-Wawrinka at the Aussie in 2013 among many others. This very much had that feel, and along with taking the mantle as one of the greatest matches of all time, I think, it ran away by a country mile with match of the year to this point. You look at a match like this, and when both guys have absolutely emptied the bucket for so long, it really feels like one of those matches where no one deserved to lose. In this case, that just happened to be Jannik Sinner. However, I don't think there's really anything to sulk about on his end. He has answered all my questions about him, especially in the second half of this year, resoundingly. I think Darren Cahill, that partnership, is serving him beautifully. Darren Cahill, obviously, a great coach historically, and he has worked his magic over Jannik this season. My main concern with him prior to this season was I didn't know if his peaks were going to be formidable enough to really put a chink in the armor of the, very topmost echelon of the game. Between Wimbledon and now this US Open, I think that has all been put to rest. He has improved tremendously this year, and at 21 years of age, even as devastating a loss as it must be, I'm sure he's only going to continue growing and learning from whatever he took out of this match. And on the flip side, I think Carlos Alcaraz, this was a much needed win. It's been noted how much trouble Sinner has given him over their last 2 matches at Wimbledon and then Umag. You did see what I believe to be his best surface, and hard courts really give him a bit extra degree of comfort. But still, some of those patterns that had been favoring Sinner, that had become problematic for Carlos, were beginning to emerge. And even through the middle portion of this match, I think this would have been a very disheartening loss for Alcaraz. And it certainly looked like we were trended that way, especially after the 3rd set. And I say disheartening because I really think Alcaraz, during that portion of the match where slowly but surely was being turned against him, had thrown, as big a punch as he could, and by virtue of not taking his chances while Sinner did, or by virtue of matchup, whatever the case, or a combination, in spite of throwing haymakers, he was down 2-1 and staring down the barrel of a 4-set loss. This summer has revealed that there are some growing pains for Carlos still, and he's had to adjust to the expectations and playing with the target on his back, really. And while history has taught us already with this kid that he was never going to go into the night quietly, it did look like it might be a little too late, yet just in the nick of time he was able to rescue himself and really get a landmark win here. And while it may have been just by the skin of his teeth, I do think that although, when you empty the bucket, both guys in a match like this, no one deserves to lose, but I do think that the better player through the course of this match ended up coming out on top in the end. To start, I think Alcaraz came out firing, and meanwhile Sinner, for the better part of really 2 sets, looked weary from his prior matches on his way to the quarters, went to 5 twice coming in, including the match right before this one. And that opening set, Carlos really made a statement, really had no problems breaking the Sinner serve, in fact did it 3 times. Something that he'd been completely unable to do in the last 2 matches, where I believe he was 0 for 7 and then 0 for 9 on breakpoint against the Sinner serve. Jannik did tidy up his play in the second and broke on an absolute howitzer of a forehand early in the second, and that is another shot that has become a bit of a trademark for Jannik Sinner. The commentators were making note of how it was Juan Martín del Potro-esque, and certainly the frozen rope running cross-court forehand that Jannik has developed has become very much reminiscent of that. He broke on that shot and didn't really give Alcaraz much of an opportunity to break back throughout that set, all the way up until 5-4, and Carlos himself save a bit of a loose service game when being broken early in that second. He really didn't blink after that. He was still playing at a very high level. 3-5 down, I remember he hit an absurd open stance sliding backhand winner. And all the while, it still looked like Sinner was ailing just a little bit. That 4-5 game, seemingly out of nowhere, Carlos was able to get the break back. And then, with Sinner serving to stay in it at 5-6, obviously, Alcaraz got out to the love 40 lead. Sinner pretty much erased all of them with unreturnable serves. The Sinner serve, although not yet perfect, has also been a big reason why this head-to-head has changed this year. I think under Darren Cahill, he has revamped his serve motion a little bit, and certainly it has its hitches and moments where it does falter still, but when he hits his spots, it's just such a hard serve to read. And even when you know his favorite serves going out wide, particularly on the ad side, when he hits a spot, it really just doesn't seem like it matters. You can see it coming, and still, when it hits the mark, it's just so effective. And that's pretty much what Sinner did to save ultimately 4 out of 5 set points that he had to in the second. That being said, of course, still in the 5-6 game, of course, Alcaraz hit the wild behind the back shot that was totally out of necessity, honestly. We should be used to it at this point. This is why Carlos Alcaraz is just so watchable, and damn near every match he plays, it seems, you get that one moment at least per match where jaws drop and everyone in the stadium is standing up going crazy. And you see something that, quite frankly, you might never have seen before. And, followed that ridiculous behind the back shot up with a backhand pass off of it. After that shot, I honestly was like, you gotta break in this game after that. There's no way. And sure enough, that set point did come up, the fourth of that game. And he absolutely butchered a sitter forehand off of an incredible lob he hit. Jannik flailed and barely got his racket on it. And Alcaraz had Sinner guessing the wrong way where he was going to hit that shot. And had he simply made it over, that was set right there. And that, I think, was the inflection point. I think everybody watching this match saw that miss and, charted it down in your head, because if you lost that set, that was absolutely what we were going to look back on. And to their credit, both played a very hard-fought tiebreaker after that. I think, honestly, after that miss, you didn't see as much of the frailty physically in Sinner. It really seemed to breathe life in him that he was able to stick around as long as he did. And he played a tremendous tiebreak, saved another set point in the breaker, and somehow, someway, he evened it up at a set apiece. I think it was bad enough having to reset from that miss in the second set, but to his credit, Carlos did a tremendous job of doing so at the beginning of the third. He got a couple of holds and really kept on putting pressure on Jannik Sinner's serve early in that set. And yet again, it felt that we were in that place where Carlos just was unable to take any of these break points and break Jannik Sinner's serve. I believe going back to that 5-6 game, 4 break point chances missed there. And then early in the second, at least through the first 2 service games, it had been at least another 4 break points that had gone by the wayside. But nonetheless, Alcaraz still did dig deep to get the break, I believe at 2-all. Consolidated it one time, and then Sinner was able to break back and get it all the way back to 5-4 Jannik. And really, it was at this point where, more of those patterns were beginning to come to the fore, where Alcaraz really was starting to press, and we had seen that plenty before. Sinner has had this way over their last 2 matches of really just suffocating Carlos and forcing him to go for these highlight reel shots that he really has no business going for. It really does go back to that whole, notion that Alcaraz does need to become a bit more patient, because when he chose to, he was more than holding his own in the long rallies with Jannik Sinner, and I don't see why he shouldn't be capable of doing that. But still, Jannik, the clean ball striker that he was hitting with depth and really going for safe targets, if we're being honest, while beginning to punish the Alcaraz serve a lot more. Through the middle portion of this match, the free points on Alcaraz's serve really started becoming more far and few between. And these were things that we had all taken note of in their last 2 meetings. Still, Alcaraz was able to get out to another break lead and get back from 4-5 to 6-5. There was a marathon serve game here where I think Sinner really just came up with the goods more than anything, came up with some excellent returns. And then, of course, one of the best points of the match when Alcaraz had already saved 2 break points, I believe, and it was deuce. And if you ask me, Carlos really did everything right to get himself to net here and hit a pretty good volley. Sinner was there. Carlos, to his credit, did everything he could to wall up at net. Some great reflexes, but Sinner was able to find the open court. And then with a miss inside in attempt off a 1-2 from Alcaraz, I think the wheels really fell off there. For the first time, Alcaraz actually seemed to get frustrated with how this match was playing out and all the opportunities that he had not taken advantage of to this point, and he got skunked in this breaker. Jannik played a great tiebreak as well. I think he sensed what was going on the other side of the court, and he took full advantage. And at this point, obviously, me being the staunch Carlos Alcaraz believer that I am, I still felt that he wasn't completely dead and gone, considering I still felt that he was the more fit player and had more reserves energy-wise. But putting it bluntly, it was very hard for me to see a world where he could just shake off what had happened in each of the last two sets and find a way to reset. And really, that's how the script was going. That frustration really bleeded over into the beginning of the fourth. Alcaraz was broken relatively easy in the first game of the fourth. I believe in the second service game of the fourth, Sinner did flirt with the double break, got to deuce. I don't think he created a break point, but he did get to deuce. Carlos survived that game, and I think that was the one that kind of let him cool himself down. Got a couple of easier holds after that, even though he remained a breakdown, but still got himself on the board and created a little bit of scoreboard pressure. And this really is the thing with Alcaraz, right? You know, there's so many fluctuations within a match still where one portion of the match he'll be absolutely flying around, hitting winners he has no business hitting. And then the next, when, you know, some ill-advised shot selection that he was pulling off earlier, there'll be equal patches of him just leaking errors. And at this point, I think Alcaraz, when he broke back in the fourth, hit one of those purple patches for a game, played an absolutely brilliant return game, and, you know, everyone in the crowd at that point was believing again. And somehow, immediately, we got another plot twist as Jannik Sinner responded with his own purple patch of a return game, shaking off the disappointment of being broken, responding with a love return game of his own. That game ending with Alcaraz's frustration yet again boiling over as he launched a ball as hard as he could way up into the stands. And on the changeover, he was absolutely irate, talking with his box. I believe I read on Twitter that he was asking, "Where do I serve?" because Sinner was absolutely punishing that serve. And as I noted earlier, the free points at this point were pretty much very few and far between. If I remember correctly, Jannik got through a relatively routine serve game after that. And at that point, you know, you really were looking at an uphill battle. I talked to my buddy who I was chatting with during that match and said, well, the good news is, throughout his career so far, Alcaraz has proven to be ice when his back is against the wall. The bad news is, in pretty much every high leverage clutch moment tonight, he has been an absolute horror show. So something had to give at that point. And sure enough, yet again, with his back to the wall, Alcaraz proved to have ice in his veins. From Alcaraz's end, I don't really think there was anything that flashy in this game, but he put on the pressure from the word go. With his back to the wall, he really just steadied himself, and there were none of those ill-advised rally ball misses or regulation return misses either. Carlos just kept putting quality returns in play and made Jannik play, and Sinner, to his credit, all the way up to the first break point that he faced in that game, kept coming up with clutch serving under pressure yet again. And once he got a hold of his first match point, Carlos was lucky enough to get a look at a second serve on that match point and put in a pretty good return that elicited a mishit out of Sinner that was sent wide. And it was at this point that I think Sinner really blinked. Consecutively, a double fault followed up to bring up break point, and right after, he sent a swinging volley wide where he had plenty of open court to work with cross court. From that point, you know, all of the crowd that was left in the stadium was pulling hard for Alcaraz, and he really did seem to feed off of that, and he sensed the tension on the other side of the net. It did seem like Sinner, for the remainder of the set, was pretty shell-shocked, and Alcaraz jumped all over it, and those remaining two games of the fourth went by very quick. As far as the fifth set went, I think early on Jannik Sinner did a great job with the momentum completely in Carlos Alcaraz's favor. I believe the opening service game of his in the fifth, he had to come back from love 30, and that was a situation where I think a lot of people would have cracked. Alcaraz, coming off that jolt from the fourth, really was coming at him full speed ahead. And Sinner did an excellent job stemming the tide. All the momentum pretty much evaporated and we were pretty much on even footing again. and I believe at 2-all, Alcaraz played a bit of a loose service game, ending with a terrific Sinner return right in the corner. And then that game at 3-2 serving, I thought, was another instance where Jannik really did blink here. Sinner got up to 40-15 in this game and gave away a couple of cheap points to reel it back into deuce. One of which was a first ball forehand where the serve had gotten Alcaraz way off court and he pushed it long. And that's really the point where I think Alcaraz didn't need a second invitation. He got the break back and surged ahead to 4-3, and in that return game, you just knew that Alcaraz was about to make a big push to try and serve this one out, and that's exactly what happened. And yet, in this game, I was just completely blown away. The force in Alcaraz's legs hadn't diminished at all. It really was staggering to see how his persistence to try and get to every ball possible hadn't sagged off at all, and the speed really hadn't diminished at all. Not to mention, at this point, he was returning absolutely terrifically. He was on to that center wide serve. And that 30-all point, really, even though Alcaraz lost it, it was utterly insane. Sinner was just taking him from corner to corner. And every time, Alcaraz had the response, so much so that he threw up another terrific lob. And similar to that one miss that seemed to flip this match earlier on, Sinner flailed to get his racket on it. Alcaraz had a pretty routine ball, sent it up the line. Sinner guessed right. The forehand was just short enough for Sinner to be able to get there and guide this ball into the open court cross court, and it really was one of the best points in a match that had no shortage of highlight-worthy points. And I think Alcaraz's persistence in that point paid off, because the very next one, it essentially earned him the next point, as Sinner ended up netting a first ball backhand. That whole sequence was incredible, because right after Alcaraz hit a return winner to set up break point, Sinner snuffed it out, and the second deuce point, another instance where I'm sure a lot of us were wondering how in the world is this dude moving like this 5 hours plus in. Sinner had Alcaraz on the run again, came in on a very good approach. Carlos hit a remarkable angle forehand on the run, and Jannik, he followed that up with a great pickup of his own off a half volley essentially. This ball landed relatively short and Alcaraz was onto it in a flash. Those two instances of scrambling I think really earned Carlos this break. And when serving it out, Jannik was still coming at him. I remember the opening point in that 5-3 game. Sinner again had him on a string, and again Alcaraz was just all over the place. Some absurd gets for any point in the match, but even more otherworldly for a match in its fifth hour, in its last game pretty much. And that ultimately rewarded him with the opening point of that game, and following that he found his two best serves of the match. This was a match where neither guy really served all that great, but when the chips were down and Carlos Alcaraz needed it the most, 15-all ace out wide, and then 40-30 match point, he hit a serve that he really hadn't tried all match, but he ended up pelting a body serve at 128 that hit its mark, and 5 hours and 15 minutes later, somehow, someway, Carlos Alcaraz had made it to the finish line. Hell of a match, absolute gem of a match this one, and I went over so many reasons that made it as great as it was earlier in this video and what this match symbolized, but I just cannot overstate how special a feeling it was watching that match start to finish. Really just a beautiful sense of nostalgia, seeing something that took you back to the early 2010s where you pretty much had our superheroes in the big three duking it out with each other, going to war, or warding off the ultra-inspired challenger just about every tournament they played in. And to see that similar war of a match take place again, this time with different faces, was extremely special to watch in real time. These two guys are remarkable, remarkable talents, and it's been real special seeing sports as it typically does, replenish itself. And really, for the first time after that match, I feel comfortable saying that the game actually is in great hands post Big 3. Just another chapter in what has been an unconventional, albeit electrifying and special US Open this year. You know, a lot of big stories that have resulted in, I think, a lot more eyes on the tennis world and this US Open than what was initially expected or what is typically the case. And I don't really know where we go from here, considering how unpredictable this draw has been so far, and now Alcaraz coming off 2 matches back-to-back that finished late in the 5th, where he probably didn't go to bed any time before like 6 or 7 a.m. We'll see how he will recover. Wouldn't put it past him. The guy is an absolute alien. I had a video that I wanted to go up before the quarterfinals yesterday about my biggest takeaways from the US Open so far, but it was blocked twice. That video is ready now, and it will come out shortly after this one, so be sure to check that one out as well. Some of those takeaways are a bit outdated now, given 2 matches unfolded after, but it is what it is. But otherwise, that will do it for this video. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed. If you did, it would be much appreciated if you could drop a like and help this video perform better in YouTube's algorithm, and subscribe to the channel if you're not already. Thank you all again so much for watching, and of course, I will see y'all in the next one.